This is the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, Episode 2. Welcome to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about things that you can do to ensure that you have the best possible season, and we'll be joined by freelance photographer and Avery Outdoors territory manager Mark Brenden to talk about tips that you can use to take better pictures in the field. We've got a great show lined up for you, and we're glad you're here. Welcome to the show. My name is Josh Palm. We appreciate you guys joining us here for the second episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you, sir?
Hey, we're just a couple days away from season starting, so my trigger finger is getting a little itchy here.
Yeah, tell me about that. So much goes into the first hunt of the year. You know, the amount of text messages that are going back and forth between, all of our buddies and everybody that's going to be going in on this first hunt of the year. The anticipation can't get any higher. So, I'm certainly feeling that anxious nerves, getting ready to head up to Pennsylvania, join you boys, and get that first one out of the way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm ready to go. Got everything cleaned up, ready to pack up and get in the field. It's that time again, finally.
Yeah. So we've got a real good show here. This episode we were going to be joined by Mark Brendemuehl. He is a freelance outdoor writer and photographer and territory manager for Avery Outdoors. So we're going to have a good chat with him about, just some tips to help everybody have better success shooting pictures in the field. And obviously some tips that'll just help you, whether you're taking, pictures of the family or whatever. So lots of good information from him. And, kind of just what we were talking about. Now that the season is rolling around and we're getting ready to go in full swing here, we thought it'd be a good time to maybe take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that you can do ahead of time and prepare yourself to have the best season possible. And, honestly, a lot of these things that we're going to talk about can be done year round, and probably should be done year round. But, it's better late than never to double check that list and make sure that you're taking care of the things that you need to so you're not in your own way and from having a good season. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, Dan, just kind of in the same vein that we started the last episode with, number one thing, that both you and I think is super important about allowing you to have a good season is scouting. I mean, you can't beat this, dead horse enough, obviously, but, if you don't know where the birds are going to be, it's kind of hard to have a good, a successful hunt.
Yeah. And, we went over that quite a bit in the first episode, so we can rehash it all day. But one thing that we didn't talk about too much is having a backup plan. If you go to a field and there's already 7 or 8 guys set up and it's somewhere that you want to be, but you also know that you could have a successful hunt in another field. That's just a good preparation of having a backup field, knowing where other birds are at. That can never hurt. So that's just one point that we didn't cover in the first episode.
Yeah, and something to go along with that's incredibly important is, throughout the summer and stuff like that, you should obviously be maintaining contact with the farmers and landowners that you have permission to hunt their properties. But you want to ensure before that season starts that you're good with permission with them. Stop by, have a chat with them if you haven't talked to them in a little while. But make sure that you're still good. See if there's anyone else that they may have given permission to. Make sure that the ground rules that you've come to know are still the same. You're allowed to drive in the fields, that sort of thing. That goes a long way to when, like you described, you pull up to a field one morning and there's somebody there that you're not expecting, or, there's cattle in the field that you weren't expecting. And you got to use a fallback plan, knowing where knowing where you can go and where you got permission is important. So double checking that is critical.
Yeah. And, we talked about this a little bit, depending where you're at, some farmers or some landowners, not even farmers, they're just not going to give permission. And some that you go and you stop and you talk to, whether it's waterfowl hunting or deer hunting, helping out a landowner, it just it's priceless to go out and, bale some hay for them or clean up, the backfield, or, doing some extra work in the off season is always going to help out.
Yep, no doubt. And, one more thing I wanted to bring up, just sort of more than just a generic scouting tip, is, really pay attention to your area in the core areas that you're hunting and find those roost locations. Because if for whatever reason the birds that you're hunting, get boogered out for some reason, or if the flight changes and pressure's up, that kind of thing, if you know where those birds are roosting, it's going to be a lot easier to go back and find those birds and track them to where they're going to feed. And there's a lot of guys that, maybe, coming in from out of the area and looking for birds, and they might see those birds in that field, get a good hunt on them, and then they're gone. But if you know where they're roosted and you can track them the next day and the following day and get back on that pattern, it's going to allow you to get, back into the spots where you need to be, versus just trying to, get into one of your old faithful fields and see if you can hunt some, traffic that's going to be coming through the area. So, knowing those roost locations is just such a critical thing that just can't be overlooked.
Yeah. And I mean, just bringing up that point, if you want the birds to be gone out of an area, hunt the roost in the first couple hunts. It's well known that if you do that and just blow them out of their roost, they're not going to be comfortable sleeping, and, that's their bedroom. So that's one thing you don't want to do. If they're local birds, if it's getting late and you think they're going to end up taking off out of there, you can have a bang out hunt with some buddies, go in there and finish them off, if you will. But the first few hunts, find that roost location and follow them out to the fields. Don't go and blast them out of their home.
Yeah, great point. Obviously something that's just super important to keep in mind when you're hunting, especially if you're choosing to hunt a water location. Know exactly what you're getting into before you go there. Another thing that I think is really important about going into the season is knowing your schedule. I'll use myself for an example. I know this fall I've got couple different weddings I've got to go to. My wife's going to be out of town for conferences on a couple occasions, so I'm going to have to be taking care of my kids and that sort of thing. So what that does, though, is allow me to know, okay, these are the weekends that I'm going to be here. These are the weekends that I'm going to, be tied up with, other responsibilities. And it really allows me to focus on that time and where I want to be and what I can do in those weekends that I have available, to be as effective as I can, especially if you're trying to plan out of town hunts or, go on a guided trip or something like that. It's just important to know what you got going on ahead of time. That way you can kind of plan and just be a little more proactive in your approach.
Yeah. The happy wife, happy life saying can't be any more true, especially when hunting season comes around and you want to be gone every day or every other day, and especially every weekend. So I know one of my biggest time consumers is cutting and stacking wood. We heat with wood, and that's a big one on my plate. So, I agree with you. Get it set up, get everything done, and it'll be a much better hunting season for you.
Yep, for sure. I mean, getting that honey-do list taken care of is something that you can't avoid it. And, like you said, if you're trying to be gone, throughout the weekends and, long periods of time hunting, it's important that you take care of, what you got to do at home first. Another thing that's important, is obviously prepping your gear. I mean, that's, for me as a waterfowler, half of the enjoyment of hunting for me is just the gear. I love, getting new gear. I love tinkering with things. I like cleaning blinds and brushing blinds and, getting decoys rigged up and all that good stuff. So obviously, taking care of your gear before you get into the season is something that should not be overlooked.
Yeah. One thing, we get out on a boat quite a bit. So, servicing your motor, if you're not a tech savvy guy and do it yourself, a lot of the local places, I mean, $20-$25 and you get a full service on it, and, fluid change and everything. So the last thing you want is to be out on the water and, not be able to start your engine. Along with that, your trailer, if it's a boat trailer or if it's a decoy trailer, check your tires, check your axles. If you're banging around through cornfields, they're bumpy, stuff gets messed up. Make sure it's nice and tight before you head out there, because that's another thing you don't want to be doing is trying to jack up a loaded trailer in a bunch of mud. So,
and there's nothing worse than, driving 45 minutes, an hour to a spot, cold morning, you get out on the launch and you can't get the motor to crank over. I mean, talk about a complete, heartbreak, waste of a day, a lot of frustration there. So try to avoid those if you can, and properly service your motor. And another thing that I think is completely avoidable that, Dan, you can speak a little bit to, check your waders for leaks. Mid-November mornings when, you're wading through ice and busting ice and stuff to get to birds is not a good time to realize that you have a hole in the crotch of your waders. And about 10 minutes into the hunt, you got a left boot full of cold water, right?
Yeah, after, we busted through ice to get out into the water and busted through ice to get back on shore, and then you go and set decoys, and before the sun's up, you're already thinking about hypothermia because your whole left leg is completely numb and you can't stop shaking. So that's something that, if someone has a pull or, there's a lot of easy ways to check if there's leaky waders. If it's still warm out, get in the water now and, put a pair of shorts on and you find that nice and easy. It's a lot better than the days when it's frozen over on a river or on a lake. So yeah, that was not a good experience. And I don't know if I've apologized to you enough for that day.
I'm sure my time's coming. I'm sure of that. But,
I hope not.
And that hunt specifically reminds me, as waterfowlers, we expose ourselves to some of the harshest conditions that the winter has to offer. And when you mix, when you're in water, that can become a really, really dangerous situation if you're not careful. So, checking all of your safety type equipment, check your batteries, make sure you got good batteries in all your flashlights, your headlamps, your GPS, your boat batteries are charged up good. Your trolling motor, if you're using that, is charged up good. Make sure, you've got the things that you needed if in a pinch or in a tough situation where somebody falls in, something catastrophic happens, that you give you give yourself a chance to, reach help, or do what you got to do to get back safely. So, that's incredibly important. And it's always tough when you see these stories in the news about, duck hunters out on water and something happens where they don't come back. So take every precaution that you can ahead of time to put yourself in a good situation when you get out there.
Right. And, the interview that we had with Mark, I talked to him a little bit afterwards, and he was talking about going out, taking pictures, and he was actually coyote hunting. And, he went by himself, and they walk some rivers out there that are frozen over, and he just let his parents know before he went out, I'm going down this way, and, the roads are closed and whatnot. Well, he ended up falling through the ice, and, luckily, he could make a phone call, but, that's not a position that you want to be in or wish anyone to be in ever. So, it could get scary and it can get real dangerous real quick.
Yeah, for sure. Can never be too careful. Something else that's always, one of my favorite things to do leading up to the season is practice with your calls. Whether you're a contest caller that, has a good command of the short reed goose call, or you're a guy that uses the flute and, you go out and make a few clucks and, there's just as effective going that route. Grab the call, whatever it is, your weapon of choice, get out there, blow into it a little bit, knock the dust off it. It's a great time to try to learn a new note or, a new cadence or something like that. Just sort of, get out there and, knock the rust off it a little bit.
Yeah. And you can't speak enough about confidence on a call. One thing I like to do is just randomly pick up my call and act like a group of honkers are coming in. They're a little ways out, and make sure that first note is crisp every single time, and you want to be able to hit that. So if you even practice just that, that first initial honk or whatever you want to do, set goals for yourself and make sure that you can pick that call up and have confidence when you get out in the field. You don't want to go out and just start, sounding like a bad saxophone when you're trying to call some honkers in. So
Yep, no doubt. Another thing that's super important, you spend all this time perfecting your craft, using calls, cleaning your decoys, getting your trailer squared away, all that good stuff. And so many people neglect the moment of truth, patterning your shotgun, making sure that where you put that front sight is where the majority of your pattern is going to be centered. There's new chokes coming out every year, new ammo that's coming out every year. You may decide to go a different route than what you've been using, something like that. just make sure that you take the time to pattern your gun and find the right pattern and the right choke for for your hunting situation.
Yeah, and the situation is a big key word right there. If you're goose hunting, if you're duck hunting, if you're in a field and you think they're going to be landing right in your lap, or if you're, some people enjoy pass shooting, so you don't want a real tight choke going out over a river when they're going to be flying by.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, when you take the second to think about the spot that you're going to hunt, think about the type of encounters that you plan to have. Is it a spot that you're going to have birds, feet down coming in your hole, 20 yards, right there type shots? Or, are these situations where you're going to be shooting a little further, 30, 40 yards, maybe some pass shooting, maybe you're on some pressured land where it's tougher to get them to, to decoy, but they might get close enough to give you a look where you can get a good ethical shot if you've patterned and you got the right choke tube in there and that you're capable of making shots at that distance. So think about that when you're planning your hunt, and in the off season, thinking about where you plan to hunt. Make sure you're set up properly for each situation.
Right. And I was just going to make another comment on that. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but when you are, checking out your chokes and, shooting your gun, when you're shooting clays, you have one, maybe two clays to shoot at. When you get in the field, there's so many people that just pull up and they shoot between birds. And I don't know why. I think it's just the pure excitement, the intense moment. But I challenge everyone out there that does this. Take your time when you pop out of the blind, or if you're in a pit or however you're hunting, take your time, pick out one bird and, lay the hammer down. Try and work every time you go out. Try and make yourself better. And, you don't spend as much on ammo.
Yeah, we could do a whole segment, and I'm sure we will at some point, on different shooting techniques and things. And one of the biggest mistakes people make, and I'm absolutely guilty of doing this myself, is just flock shooting. You get overwhelmed with the amount of birds you got in front of you, and you think, I got a whole, shell full of BBs here. Something's going to make contact and knock something down. And more times than not, it doesn't. So great point. Pick one out and get a good, sight picture on that particular bird and make a good shot. Talking specifically with ammo, now's a great time to keep your eyes open for ammunition sales. There's a lot of places online that will offer a discount, free shipping if your state permits that. Keep your eyes open for that. Ammo's obviously cheaper when you can buy it in bulk, get a case deal. Always a good time if you can save a couple bucks up front, if you're going to shoot that much, to go ahead and knock that out right up front. Yeah.
And even if, if you have a couple buddies and you want to split a case or split a couple, there's no problem with that. You're still getting $5 off per box. So, ways around things, giving you tips here.
Oh yeah. It's $5 as you can say here is, $5 worth of gas you can put in your truck scouting for birds and that kind of stuff. So, another area that's sort of important, and, I don't have much personal experience with this because I don't have a retrieving dog, but, for those of you out there, and, Dan, you could probably speak to this, but, work with your dog. If you're not training, as much as you once were when they were going through the learning phase, make sure you do a little refresher, and, obviously any kind of accessories or new, things you plan on using with the dog in the field, make sure you give that dog a shot to work with those prior to actually being in the blind hunting.
Yeah, I think, one of the most beneficial pieces to a hunt can be a dog. And if you like you said before, you put all the time in doing everything else, you don't want to get out there and have a dog that's, just not listening or running out in the middle of a field when you have a flock coming in. Taking the time, if you're going to take the dog out there, you owe it to the dog. And there's a lot of people that will agree with me. There's nothing more beautiful to watch than a dog working either ducks or geese. Like, there's nothing like it to watch them go out and do their thing. And I don't know, I'm always playing with my dog, but one thing I do, if I got twins, so if I have to put them to bed, I'll take her down to the boat launch, and it's lighted down there. So I'll go down at, 10 and 10:30 at night and work with her. You want to talk about low light situations. So, she's trained in all facets there.
Yeah. Those are, something just like as much, we all look at dogs as kind of a friend and a part of the family, but they also, require the same kind of attention that all the other gear that you count on in the field does too. So don't overlook those things. Another thing, you want to check your camo, make sure that, whatever you've got from last year, if you had anything that's damaged or worn down, you want to replace. And, obviously if there's a new pattern out there or something like that, that's caught your eye, it never hurts to, splurge a little bit on some new clothing.
Yeah. Like you said, all those magazines come out, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that just drools over all the new equipment out.
Yeah. Maybe, a new pair of, waders could be in your future for this season. I don't know. Just saying. The last thing, that I think is super important as you kind of come into a new season is, see if you can't find yourself a new hunting buddy. I mean, the beautiful thing about waterfowl is, it's not like you're all out there hunting one particular buck or something like that. There's plenty of birds, going to be flying in the sky this fall. Part of the fun, for me is I can have a blast in a duck blind or a goose pit and never fire my gun all day. I won't have as much fun as if we were having a bang up hunt. But for me, and I know a lot of people like me, it's about spending time with people that you care about. And, there's always room for another good friend that, has the same kind of dedication and passion for waterfowl as you might.
Yeah. And not even, I mean, talking about, dedication, maybe they've never been on a hunt. So, invite somebody new and, get them hooked, because it probably won't take long. You hear some whistling wings of some ducks coming over you in the morning, and, there's nothing like it. So you make a great point. You
can never have too many hands, brushing blinds and, pitching in for gas and decoys and, all the stuff that it takes to be successful waterfowl hunting. So, don't be closed-minded to, meeting new people, and, you never know what might happen with that. So, that's kind of the short list of things that we thought were important, that we kind of look into before every season. And again, a lot of those things you should be checking throughout the season and ensuring that, your gear's in tip-top shape and you're not neglecting anything, because at some point down the road, it definitely will bite you. It might be that you haven't cleaned your shotgun all season and you're in a goose field in February and it's below zero, and, your gun freezes up and won't cycle and won't function. I don't know if Dan's ever had that happen to him, but, I imagine that if someone didn't clean their gun properly, that it would happen.
Yeah, let's go on to the next segment. How about it, huh?
All right. Fair enough. Next in the show, we are excited to be joined by Mark Brendemuehl. He is a freelance outdoor writer and photographer and a territory manager for Avery Outdoors. And we're going to talk with him about some camera tips and ways to be more effective with the other type of gun, the camera, in the field. All right, we are excited to be joined on the podcast by Mark Brendemuehl. He's a freelance writer and outdoor photographer. He's also a territory manager for Avery Outdoors. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Mark, we've got tons of stuff that we want to get into with you here today, and a lot of things that we want, we're looking forward to you sharing with us. But, first and foremost, the big thing we're going to focus on today is, your photography and, the work that you've done specifically with photographing waterfowl and things like that. So just share with us and our listeners, how'd you get started and how'd you get into taking waterfowl pictures and to the level that you're at today?
Oddly enough, I got started from my mother. My mother went through a community ed course when I was a little kid, and she was a big fan of wildlife, stuff like that. And obviously back then, camera equipment was a bit different. That was back with the old 35 millimeters and film, and where you really had to know your stuff. It's not like today where you can just take pictures and a blur of them and hope for the best. And but she's the one that got me started. And then working for Avery, guys that I worked with there, guys like Travis Mueller and Doug Stanky, guys that I consider to be the best in the business. I learned a lot from watching them, and kind of went from there.
That's interesting. That your mom got you started, and it just shows how, growing up with a family, how you can get involved with something like that. Mark, let me ask you, what is your current camera setup that you take to the field on a regular basis?
I've got two bodies, and for the most part, I use a Canon 5D Mark III, and most of the time I'll use an f2.8 70-200 L series lens. And a lot of people are surprised by that I don't use something a little bit longer. And I do have a 100-400 that I do use on occasion. But I've just kind of found that 70-200, because it's so much faster and so much better in that low light, that initial morning light, it's just kind of became my go-to lens, and I've just learned to adapt with it being short.
Mark, there's a million choices out there when it comes to photography equipment, and the choices are endless. But two questions really. One, what made you go with Canon? Was there a reason that you picked that that manufacturer over some of the other popular ones, Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, whoever? And to kind of build onto that, tell us about some of the accessories that you use, and if you had to have one accessory that you will absolutely not be caught dead without in the field, which one is that? The one that you couldn't live without?
Yeah, I started out with Nikon, and Nikon makes a great camera. And I went from Nikon to, most of my friends had Canon, and when I was trying to learn and do what they were doing, the nomenclature wasn't the same. And I decided that, if I was going to learn from them, it would be easier for me to learn if I had kind of the same setup as them. And that's really why I switched. I don't think there's a big difference between those two camera manufacturers and lens setup. They're both great in their own aspects. As far as accessories, I guess I'd have to say a soft cloth cleaner. When you're doing waterfowl stuff, you are going to get your lens wet and you're going to get it dirty. And, you'll ruin a shoot if you don't have something that you can readily clean it up with.
That's good advice there. So, just recently, we've really been getting into photography, not so much waterfowl yet, but we do plan on doing that. And a lot of friends are getting into that as well. What would you say is the best DSLR for beginners, an entry level that can go out and get the job done with regular pictures?
I think, and it doesn't have to be brand specific, but for me, something with a shutter rate of at least 4 to 6 frames per second. Anything less than that, you're going to miss some action shots. And I think, something along, 10 megapixels or more, and just about any new DSLR right now is going to be more than that. That's not to say that a used camera wouldn't be a great option. For a long time, I was running a Canon 1D, and that was only 10.1 megapixels. And people were really surprised that I had a camera that was that old. But the fact of the matter was that camera shot 10 frames per second, and that was a pretty good deal for trying to shoot wildlife.
Yeah, obviously you're in a sitting there and trying to catch bluebills and things coming in incredibly fast. So obviously that plays a huge part in this. But talk to us a little bit about that relationship, the camera versus the lens. Which one's more important? If you've got only if you're working with a budget and you've got X amount of dollars to spend, where's your money going to be best served? Is it getting a camera, for example, that's a full frame, bigger sensor, takes in more light? Or how about, some of those lenses that you mentioned earlier, large shutter or large apertures, quick shutter speeds, those sort of things. Tell us about the relationship there and where you value, the guy that's going out and trying to buy the lens for the first time.
You really need both. And I don't want to sound like a cop-out, but you do need both. But if I had a choice one way or the other between a great lens or a great camera, I'll take a great lens any day over a great camera. You can use that same lens for, 20 years, and you can always upgrade and update your camera. I'll wear camera bodies out, but I still have the same lens. I've had that same 70-200 for 7 or 8 years now. It's a very fast lens with a very wide open aperture, like an f2.8, for early morning stuff and birds in flight. It's hard to beat that.
Mark, let me ask you to clarify something too. When you said the type of lens that you're using, it's a Canon L lens, 70-200. Just tell us a little bit about the difference between a normal Canon zoom lens of that type and a Canon L lens? I mean, obviously the price is going to be significantly different, but what are some of the other features that come with the level of lens that you're using there?
Basically, the L is just a better quality glass, and it very well could be that it has a faster focus motor. Don't hold me to it. But for me, it's the quality of the glass, and that's a really big deal, and that's something that I shoot rifle a lot, and I'm very into optics and stuff like that. And there's no room for second best when it comes to stuff like that. I'm a huge supporter of spending the money on glass.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that I've heard a lot, and I'd heard somewhere along the line that Canon the L lenses are a little more water sealed and protected from kind of water intrusion, which kind of gets back to that you're going to get wet if you're out there in the in the marsh or wherever trying to take pictures of waterfowl.
Yeah, you know what? Duck hunters are notoriously hard on equipment anyway. Now throw a camera and a camera lens into that, or maybe even a couple of them, and yeah, you're asking for trouble.
No doubt about that. Mark, let me ask you what, and I know we've talked about this before just because I've asked your input quite a few times since I'm starting out. What are the most common mistakes that you see people making with not just waterfowl, but everyday pictures?
For me, and you might ask, 10 different photographers, 10 different things, and maybe they'll give you 10 different answers. But for me, it boils down to the angle that the picture is taken and the lighting with that. People that are taking photos when the sun is directly overhead or the sun is at the subject's back, stuff like that. And then the angle. You really notice it more in bird in flight photography and simple stuff like dogs, retrievers, people standing up to take photos of their retriever as it's retrieving. It makes for a terrible photo, and I don't think people really realize that. But their dogs are their best friends and they're larger than life. So why would you not make it larger than life by getting lower than the subject and taking pictures at eye level or even a little bit below that, just to bring out that, your best friend with that.
Right. And it's funny because after we talked about that, I went through, I don't know how many hundreds of pictures that I had of my dog. And I'm looking back and I'm like, man, the best pictures that I have are exactly what he said. They're eye level or even below, like just to get the full body. Like you see the top of the dog all the time, and to get the full body and to really, bring in the power of the dog, the muscles and everything else, like it makes for a much better photo.
Yeah, I go back and I look at photos that I've taken over the years, and I'll look at photos from 10 years ago, and I'll say, man, it's tack sharp and it's good color, and I hate this photo with a passion. And every one of them is going to be because of that angle. I just didn't know any better back then. And now I make it a habit. I'll be out taking pictures laying in the water and, literally laying in water, trying to get eye level or below, and it's worth it.
So in addition to, the angle and the amount of attention that you pay to that, what are some other just sort of best practices that people, can use? And I'm not talking, anything high speed technical. I'm talking things that people can go out in the field tomorrow and they can employ these and to get better, get better pictures right now. What are some just simple best practices that people can use? And, I'm curious, it sort of dawned on me as we're talking about this, most people, the average guy is probably snapping pictures with his cell phone for the most part. Do you have any tips or anything that you can offer guys that are using their iPhone or their Android, but they want to still try to get a good picture of maybe their kid's first duck or, their dog, their first retrieve of the year, they've been working all summer, that kind of thing. Just sort of any general practices for guys like that?
Yeah, you know what? No matter what type of camera you're using, you always want to have the sun at your back. And that's going to accomplish two things. One, you're putting full light on your subject, and that's going to pop out that detail a little bit more. And two, you're not going to be having that light reflecting off of the lens or that flat surface off the phone or anything like that, where you're spooking birds, etc. As duck hunters, we always want the wind at our back, but I'll hunt a crosswind so that I can have my son at my back. Anytime that it's even remotely feasible, I'm going to do that, just for those two reasons alone.
Nice. All right, I'm going to go into one, and I'd actually like to step back a little bit. You were talking about f-stop, and, your 70 to 200 is a 2.8. My first question would be to kind of explain that. You talked to me a little bit about how you explain it to people and how the actual camera works, and that's getting to my second question is the best tips for getting off of auto. It seems like everyone, and we brought this up when we were talking, everyone wants instant gratification on a picture without going out and taking the actual pictures. They put it on auto and they shoot and shoot and shoot, but they don't really learn the camera and how it works. So kind of explain how, the f-stop and the shutter speed correlate, and then the best tips to get off of that.
Sure. The biggest thing is go out and do this in the summer before the hunting season starts and before it's, critical to you, and, before it's, so you're not stressing out about it. Practice on your kid, practice with your dog, stuff like that. Basically, the way I try to explain it when I teach community ed classes is look at the aperture and the shutter basically as your eye. And what I'll tell people is consider that shutter your eyelid. And the slower that you close that eyelid, the longer your eyeball is exposed to light. And that just makes sense that the faster the shutter speed, the less light is going to come in. So when you're out there, and if you don't have light to begin with, and you're shooting at just a brutally high shutter speed so that you don't have things blur, like say 1/2000th of a second, it's not going to let in enough light. So maybe you need to back that down to like 1/1600th of a second, and that can make a huge difference. The aperture, I'll tell people to look at it as like an iris, and the more open your iris is, the more light that it allows in. So a 2.8 is going to let in, a lot more light than a 4.5 or a 5.6 lens. And I think that's probably the best way to consider that. With aperture, and I know a lot of people, I'm probably the minority, I like to shoot on shutter priority or what Canon calls the time value mode. And a lot of people prefer to shoot in aperture. In time value, the camera is picking the best aperture for me. And because birds in flight are going from maybe a blue background to being eye level with cattails, and now it's dark or on the water, the aperture can change a lot faster than what I can change it. So I prefer to shoot shutter priority. But to be honest, one of the first things I do when I get out to a marsh or a slough or just any photo shoot is I'll take a picture on full auto and look and see what the camera thought the best settings were. And that gives me a great place to start and then manipulate it how I need to.
And that's an incredible point, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in that exact situation where, I don't know enough about those things yet, but I'm trying to learn. And when I get myself in a situation, I start going through that thought process that you explained, and I'm basically just kind of shooting from the hip, for lack of a better term, on that first image. And then I just start that laborious correction process until I get to where I think I need to be. I never even considered the fact of just taking a frame on auto to see what the camera's computer felt was the best settings to give me that benchmark. So I think that's a huge tip.
Yeah, the way I see it, the people at Canon and Nikon, they've forgotten more about taking pictures than I'm ever going to know. But they're not in the same location that I am at the same time. So they can help me get that starting point, and then it's up to me to just manipulate it a little bit after that. I've found that personally for birds in flight, I've got to be at 1/1600th of a second, or I'm going to have blurred wings. And nothing makes me more frustrated than blurred wings in a photo. I like everything to be tack sharp. So if I don't have enough light for me to shoot at that shutter speed, then I know that I need to do something else, like jack up the ISO or or something like that in order to get that and be able to shoot where I want to shoot it.
Right. One of the best tips that through our conversations that you gave me, go back through your pictures, right click if you have to, and check the settings. You can check the settings even if you're on auto and see what the camera did and see how it made the photos look different. And going through a couple hundred pictures and actually learning, then you can get off auto and where you should be at. Like you say, 1600 is usually where you're at. If you need to adjust from there, then you need to, if you need to go up or down. And, practice makes perfect, and putting a little study time into it can't hurt.
Yeah, and that was actually something I learned. I started taking pictures back in the film day, and, film was expensive, and it was time-consuming, and then, you had, post-processing and stuff like that, and you couldn't just look at a picture after the fact and say, oh, yeah, I shot it on this setting. So I would take pictures, and I would take a notebook. Pictures 1 through 5 were taken on this setting. 6 through 10 were taken on this. Just to help me learn. And we've really got it made now because we can just right click and go into properties and do that. So I think more people would be better served if they did.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine going through the process of jotting down every setting for every exposure that you take. I mean, that's just, I flip back through my camera so quick right now and, take that for granted, obviously. So really, really good tips there. I think something I know that I'll be putting into, practice the next time I have my camera in my hand. So, let's talk a little bit more about, the type of photography that you're doing. And, do you have a favorite duck that you like to photograph more than others? And perhaps maybe share with us, one of your favorite or most memorable photos, or places where you've had opportunities to take photos of waterfowl specifically that really kind of stick in your mind.
Well, I'll be honest. If I could take more pictures of something like canvasbacks, well, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But we just don't have enough here in Minnesota to keep me in business, so to speak. Mallards are a whole lot easier to take pictures of, just because here, as long as we have open water here, they'll stick around. Even in mid-February when it's 20 below zero, we still have open water, by power plants and stuff like that. So the mallards stick around, and they're obviously a very colorful bird. They respond to decoys well. They respond to calling well. So that makes it easier to photograph.
Do you have a type? Sorry to cut you off, but do you have a type of duck that you find that customers are looking for more often? You get requests or photos that you've taken that are more popular than others that you're finding magazines and people want to use.
It sometimes, and it usually goes more with like product photography. People looking to put something on a product package or something like that. Mallards, because they are so plentiful and they are so easy to photograph, they can get them from anywhere. But some of those weird ducks, like the bluebills and the redheads and stuff like that, and they're very difficult to photograph, because of the speed that they fly at and stuff like that.
They're hard enough to kill hunting. I mean, I can't imagine taking it with a camera. I mean,
they are a pain in the neck to try and get with a camera for sure.
No doubt about it. All right. Well, Mark, coming up here, September 1st is our early goose season. And last year it was bone dry. It was a beautiful day. This year we're looking in between 40 and 80% chance of rain, depending which site you look at. So how about some tips on keeping your gear dry, specifically your expensive lens, your expensive camera? What do you do?
I keep it in a blind bag as much as I humanly can. I've got an Avery Pro grade blind bag that I'll keep it in there until I absolutely have to have it out. When I do have it out, I'm pretty anal about having a sunscreen on it, whether it needs it or not. Just to help keep water off the lens or help keep dirt out of it. And then I've also got basically a plastic sleeve that can go over the majority of the lens and the camera body, and I can still manipulate the dials through the sleeve. And it's not foolproof by any means, but it does keep a majority of the water off.
Now, are you ever out there in a full downpour, or do you kind of go towards the sunny, dry days? What's your motive there?
If it's anything more than a fairly heavy, drizzle, I just don't see the point. You're going to have a lot of problems with your autofocus. It's going to be picking up raindrops instead of your target. And unless you manually focus, you're going to struggle to get the photos that you want. And you're going to be hard on your equipment. So if it's raining too hard, there's another day next week that I can do it.
Have you ever just flat out destroyed a piece of equipment because, you were trying to get a shot or something like that and dropped the camera in the marsh or something?
Yeah, actually, I'm embarrassed to tell you how many I've dunked. I'm on, we're up to number 4.
But who's counting, right?
Only 3 of them were my fault.
Uh-huh.
One of them, I sandwiched it in between 2 decoy bags, just to keep it hidden, so there wouldn't be any glare or anything like that. And told my hunting partner, I said, hey, make sure you don't mess with these decoy bags. I've got my camera in there. Oh, yeah, no problem. And we get done, and first thing he did is come over and grab the bags, and I heard a kerploop, and that was the end of that. So only 3 of them were my fault.
Sure, but a very, very expensive lesson learned nonetheless, I'm sure.
Well, it was really expensive because, the first 3, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as camera insurance. I had no idea. And I tell you what, for $25 to $35 a year, it is well worth it for me.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely.
That's interesting because I've actually never heard of that, being new to the game. Do you know what company that is for listeners to go out and maybe look at?
I do it right through my homeowners.
It is on your homeowners?
Yeah. Yep. I just called my insurance agent, and they have a separate writer for the camera, and he actually recommended it and said, that's something we need to do.
Yeah, I think for a guy in your line of work, I think that absolutely makes a ton of sense. But Mark, let's change gears a little bit here, and tell us a little bit about your role with Avery Outdoors, and obviously you're a territory manager for them, been on their pro staff for a while. People can go on their website and check you out there, and a little bio on you. But tell us a little bit about your role there with Avery and kind of how you got started with them.
I started in 2003 on their pro staff, and very shortly after that, they called and offered me a position called a flyway manager, which was basically managing other pro staff within a specific region. And I did that for a very long time, kind of a part-time deal, working for a territory manager. And then about 3 years ago, I got a phone call one day and offering me a job in this region as a territory manager, doing sales within the Dakotas and Minnesota. That position entails a lot of photography. We do a ton of product photography for dealer support and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of where I get a lot of my photography background is because it's so necessary in the line of work that we're doing.
Nice. I was going to ask you what I always see Avery bumpers and other dogs' mouths, and your new dog, ironically named Kimber. My dog's also named Kimber, and they look exactly alike, which is awesome because I love my dog as much as you probably love yours. What's your favorite Avery product? And duck hunters, like you said before, duck and goose hunters, we are hard on our equipment. Talk about maybe some of the quality of Avery and how it can hold up for a duck hunter.
I probably my favorite would be our pro grade line of duck decoys, and that's not getting terribly specific, but just all of our pro grade line. I really think the carvings and the paint, they're hard to beat. When I started duck hunting, every duck that you put out in a marsh had their head up in the same position, the same body style. Heck, half of them were the same heads, just painted differently for different species. It's just, you look at it now and you go, wow, it's amazing that we killed ducks over them. And we did, we really did. But I think now, if I had the equipment back then that we have available now, it's just a night and day difference. I guess what I really like about Avery is just they're never happy with anything that they do. They're not happy with this carving and that carving and this paint. They're always looking at it to try and improve on everything that they have. It'd be really easy for them to say, you know what, it's good enough, and nothing's ever good enough. They're always trying to make it better.
Yeah, we actually touched on this in our last podcast. One of my favorite times of the year is when Cabela's and Max Prairie Wings and Final Flight Outfitters and those companies send out their annual catalogs. Because first thing I do is I go in there and I rifle through those pages and I look at what's changed, what's the same, who's pushing the envelope, who's getting innovative, and those sort of things. And obviously Avery has been a big part of that and developing different products and things over the years. So. Obviously a lot of good work going on there, but Mark, I got one more question for you, and we'll get you out of here on this. You've obviously carved out a nice niche for yourself in the outdoor industry. Working with Avery, doing some freelance writing, outdoor waterfowl photography, all of that good stuff. What would you say to someone who you meet at a show or something like that, and they say, "Hey, I want to get into the outdoor industry. I want to find my way." Obviously, you see that all over the place these days. Everybody wants to try to find their way in. How'd you find your way, and what would you recommend for somebody that is trying to get involved in it today?
I would tell them the biggest thing would be name recognition. Get their name out there one way or the other. And you go on some forums and you'll have a name on there, an alias like Coot Shooter 2 or something like that. And that name doesn't ring a bell when I get that application for the pro staff. So I encourage people to use their real names on forums. Be respectful, ask questions, go out and meet guys that might be able to help them along the way. I mean, I didn't get where I am by myself. I don't think any of us have. I'm sure there was guys that you guys looked up to and mentored you to, just all of that. Get with guys that can help you and ask those questions and, practice. Have people look at photographs, have people listen to your calling routines, have people help you with your shooting, all of that. Work on those skills and make yourself marketable. You guys that want to get in the industry, if you can't promote yourself, you probably can't promote a company. So, I mean, that's an important thing to learn.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys sometimes forget that it's more goes into it than just getting on TV and going out there and busting ducks and hunting some of the best places in the country and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people out there that do put in a lot of long hours and hard work in the outdoor industry to make these companies as successful as they are. So obviously we appreciate you giving us a few minutes here to join us on the podcast. And I think you've definitely given there's a lot of tips that you've given us as far as photography that I know I'll take away and be implementing. So I know we talked before we started the interview, and you don't have a specific spot where people can go and check you out, but they can look you up on Facebook, and you got a lot of your photos and stuff on there that they can check out.
Yeah, and I appreciate your guys' time. I learned stuff just from the questions that you asked. I turn around and myself and look at it and say, God, you know what? That was a good question, good point. I need to look at this a little differently. So I appreciate your guys' time as well, and I hope you guys have a great season.
Well, we appreciate that, man. And again, thanks for joining us. We encourage everybody to go and check you out on Facebook and look you up. And obviously, you've had some stuff published into you and things like that. So, Mark, thanks again for joining us, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, Dan, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of that from that interview that I know that I can take with me and employ tomorrow, the next time I have my camera in hand. So I think there was a lot of good information that Mark provided us there.
Yeah, there's a ton of information, and it just brings up a ton more questions that I'm probably going to be, calling him up and asking about. We talked before, and I got in touch with him when I was in the process of purchasing my first DSLR, and he kind of guided me through, and I'm liking the pictures I'm taking. They're not half as the quality that he takes, but keep practicing. When someone takes tens of thousands of pictures a year, it just shows that practice gets you pretty dang close to perfection. So if you're out there and only taking a couple pictures a month or 1,000 a year, you're not going to be, on upper echelon with those guys that, go out there and just hammer their cameras.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times in the past before I was too focused on photography, that I look back now and think, man, I wish I had a good quality picture, of the guys and on that hunt. Or, man, I wish I would have had a picture of, my buddy's son on his first, duck that he shot, those sort of things. So it's always great to have a nice quality photo of your experiences in the woods and in the field that you can, always look back on and, relive those hunts. So, again, good stuff with Mark. And now it's time for our parting shot. So this episode of The Parting Shot is going to be focused on something that we touched on a little bit earlier, but it's just taking new people hunting. Obviously everyone thinks, to take a kid hunting and having youth in the field is obviously an incredible opportunity for that youngster to get out and enjoy a hunt and, see what it's all about and have a mentor to show them the way. But this can also apply to, somebody that's older in life and hasn't been waterfowl hunting. Be open-minded to share this gift that we all cherish so much with people that have never been exposed to it. And like I said, in the first episode, I didn't grow up as a waterfowl hunter, but some of my fondest memories are with my family up at deer camp and hunting with my uncles and my cousins and all of those sort of things. So if you get the opportunity, don't be afraid to extend that, that arm out to somebody and say, hey, let's give this a shot. They may or may not like it, but I think we all know that time spent in the blind with a good friend and a good buddy is time well spent. So, when you go into this season and you think about your goals and the things that you want to accomplish this season, don't be afraid about thinking, what you can do for somebody else and how you can help somebody else get involved in this great sport. That's going to do it for this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We'd like to thank Mark Brendemuehl for joining us on the show. And if you like what you hear on the podcast, you can find us at hpoutdoors.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. And if you like what you hear, you can log on to iTunes, download the episodes to your tablet or iPhone. And we would appreciate a review and a rating if you get a chance. So until next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Thanks for joining us. Take care.